be used by the CRRMA to provide information to the public. So no, rather, I'd ask that the motion made by Ms. Melendez be revised to incorporate these additions.
I'll revise to incorporate those additions.
Is there a second? All those in favor, say aye. All those opposed, same sign. Minutes are adopted. Update and discussion on action on the Loop 375 at I-10 America's Interchange Project. Mr. Tejas.
Included in your backup, you'll find a very important document. As I've been briefing you at each of these meetings, excuse me, there have been a number of steps, a number of agreements that have to have been executed, and a number of steps that were put into place in order to actually begin the project. What you find before you, the letter dated August 31st, is actually the notice to proceed to the Americas Gateway Builders, the developers for the project. So this is a big deal because this is the document that actually allows them and instructs them to begin design and construction of the project. So I thought I'd share that with you, and I thought that was an important note to make for the public. So the design builder is on board. The agreements have all been signed. Everything is in place, and they are now working. And actually, I'd mentioned too that we have kind of a kickoff meeting with the Americas Gateway Builders this afternoon that I'll be attending, where we sort of a meet and greet and laying down some foundational information and getting everybody to know about everybody. So we're moving, and that's the importance of this item.
I understand there was a number of insurance bonds that were required, as well as insurance certificates. All that has been completed by America's Gateway Builder, correct? And as of the date of the signing, there is 861 days to finish the project. Is that
That's correct? That's absolutely correct. So on August 31st, I was in Austin, and we signed the Comprehensive Development Agreement. And then we issued the notice to proceed at that meeting. And you'll note in the notice to proceed, it's contingent upon AGB's provision of the performance bond, payments bond, retainage bond, and certain insurance certificates. All of those have been provided to us, and they have been reviewed by our attorneys and approved as to form and content. And I would note also, actually, a couple of the insurance certificates are in excess of the minimums required by the agreement, so we're in good shape.
Terrific. Any questions in regards to what we're doing there? Item number 6, discussion and action on the board resolution authorizing the executive director to execute an interlocal agreement with the City of El Paso relative to the development of the I-10 Corridor Aesthetic Improvement Project. Mr. Tejas.
This item, as you'll recall, we actually deleted this and the next item from the last agenda. Excuse me. Unfortunately, we have not resolved yet. The city attorney's office has found some issues with the agreement as drafted. They let me know about that late last week, and we haven't been able to resolve those issues just yet. So I'm going to ask that the board delete this item and move on to item number 7.
I have a question about that. I mean, I'll make the motion, but I just want to know what is the problem with the city? Can they potentially answer questions here about the particular project?
I'm not sure that anyone is here from
I
the
don't
city
see
that's
anybody
involved in the negotiation. From what I understand, what's been presented to me is that the attorneys have an issue with the structure of the agreement, something along the lines of there's a constitutional prohibition in the state of Texas that does not allow a municipality to loan funds, and the way that this has been structured, I believe some of the attorneys have interpreted it to be a loan. Although I would mention the way that it was structured was at their request. So they're kind of going back and forth to make sure that they understand what's being requested and why it was structured like this, so that they can be in complete compliance and sign off without reservation. So I guess to answer your question, I'm not sure of all the issues, but I can tell you that that's one of them, and they're looking at that internally. I'm not really involved in that. That's an internal discussion on their end.
As you recall, there was it's a $10 million project. $5 million of it becomes available through projected Category 2 funds in September 2011. Mm-hmm. In order to kind of kickstart the project and get it forward and get some of the artistic work done, we were looking to, the city and us were looking to create, be able to bring some funds in to start that project prior to receiving the Cat 2 funds in September. Right. Is that correct, Mr. Tejas?
That's correct.
So the agreement basically is trying to set that up and figure out how that's going to happen. So as soon as we can get that done, then we can move forward.
Why is it that, maybe you may not be able to answer the question, but why is it that they're looking at those $5 million that they would put on the table? Is it loan? I mean, is it because there's a provision that we would have to repay it back? Is that what it is? It's in
believe-
some way?
I believe what they're saying is that by them fronting the initial funds,
Right.
that's considered a loan to be repaid later. Although I would argue with that. Oh, again, I haven't spoken with any of the attorneys directly about this, but the way that it was presented to me is that, and my argument is that this type of a structure is very common. You use this in local project advance funding agreements where the municipality will begin work and will then, once the issuance of the letter of obligation comes from the federal government, you are then eligible for federal reimbursement. So you're
I
reimbursed
see.
later. So this is a very common structure. I'm just not privy to the conversation that the attorneys are having with their client.
So as soon as we have the agreement, we can kind of bring it here and we can discuss it. So at this point, if there's no further discussion, I'd like to have a motion to delete item 6 from the agenda today.
So move.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Item 6 deleted. Item 7, discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing the executive director to execute work authorization number 6 with PBS&J for the implementation of the I-10 corridor aesthetic improvement project. Mr. Tejas?
Now, this one, we also, as you know, we also deleted this one from last month's agenda. However, I'd request that we leave it on. The terms of this agreement have been negotiated with PBS&J. As a reminder, and for the benefit of our new board members, we have one master agreement with our general engineering consultant, which is really a team of engineering firms, including PBS&J as the lead, Jacobs as a sub, and a number of locals as additional subs. The way that we operate with that organization is that we enter into the one main agreement, and we have that in place since, I believe that was in 2008, we executed that agreement. Whenever we have an individual project to pursue, we actually enter into individual work authorization. So this will be work authorization number 6 that will deal specifically with the aesthetic project. So with that in mind, I'd request that this item be approved. This sets the terms and the rate sheets, or I'm sorry, the estimate, cost estimate, and all of the terms for the development of this work. The idea would be that since this has been negotiated and everything is in place, we might as well sign this and be ready for when the city comes back with their interlocal agreement. And that any changes in the interlocal, I should mention too, will not affect the work authorization.
Why can't we wait until the city comes up with the agreement to approve this?
We could, but this is in place, it's ready now, if you'd like to do it. So actually, I'll defer to the board, whichever you'd like to do.
You said it wouldn't impact anything, any changes that the city would do. I'd say let's move ahead with it. Then we have it in place.
Any other comments?
You don't care, Raymond?
Ultimately, not really. I mean, we won't move forward with the general engineering consultant until we have an agreement with the city of El Paso anyhow. So it's really entirely up to the board.
Is that stipulated someplace?
Yes, it's in the agreement, actually.
Okay, that's
Dr.
good.
Fine, are you comfortable with moving forward?
Yeah, no, I think so. Once Ralph asked that particular question, I guess that's what I wanted to know. If it didn't commit us to anything, but if it doesn't, that's fine.
No, in fact, let me talk about that section.
I mean, in the end, if the city were not to move forward with their deal, if they were to say no, we can take it back, right?
Absolutely.
Put it away.
You'll note on page 2 in section B of schedule, the GECs shall not commence the performance of any services required by Exhibit A until the authority provides a notice to proceed to the GEC, which is contingent upon the obligation of project funds from the Texas Department of Transportation.
Okay.
So the idea is until that obligation comes, until we actually have access to those funds, we will not we won't issue the notice to proceed.
Okay. Chairman?
Right. Is there a motion for item 7?
So moved.
All those is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Item 8, discussion and action on the Executive Director's Report, legislative priorities for the 82nd Texas legislative session. Mr. Tejas?
Okay, included as backup as item 8A is a one-page document that looks at some of the legislative priorities that have been discussed recently by most of the regional mobility authorities in Texas. I should mention, as background, the regional mobility authorities in the state, of which there are 8, have been meeting a little more frequently lately. And there's more coordination between us, and I think as we become a little more sophisticated and we begin to develop larger projects, we're talking more because we have although we're very different entities, we have very similar issues and very similar concerns. So with that collaboration, we're starting to identify certain legislative fixes that we would all benefit from. At a recent meeting, in fact, on September 1st, I was in Austin, and we met with the regional mobility authorities, and one of our discussion points were legislative priorities for the coming session. Through that discussion, 5 items were identified, and that's what you'll find in front of you. And I can go through them individually. What I'm asking, and I should note, I'm not asking for any action today. What I'm really doing is presenting this to you for your information so that you can take them back, review them. We can discuss this over the coming month, and I'd like to be back in October to actually adopt the priorities, the legislative priorities for the Comunidad RMA. So these are really just informational at this point. I can go through them if you'd like.
Yeah, I think it's important, Mr. Chairman, because I mean, the Regional Mobility Authority legislation had its enemies in its inception, and I'm not sure that they've altogether gone away, or perhaps they sort of have in mind legislation that would radically affect the way we do business, either forward or backward. And so I think it would be a good point to kind of make an assessment, I guess, do an assessment of what's being discussed at the legislature, even if not today. I mean, I think it would be important to think about what is it that is being discussed in Austin that will affect our work. And for what I understand, there's some important discussions going on over there. It's not just the 5 points that the RMAs are putting forth in the discussion, but there's other people that are also putting their hand on this particular item, and it'd be good to have a discussion. I'm not sure.
Dr. Pine, if you'd like, and if the board would like, I believe Mr. Tejas is prepared to discuss every one of these items kind of at length if the board would find it helpful.
No, I think before we do that, Raymond, have these been vetted against our delegations, and see how their views? Has TxDOT seen these things? In other words, are we going to run counter to some of these people that we consider strategic partners? Or were these created in a vacuum and a little bit of a...
Raymond, I believe actually these were part of the legislative priorities for last year as well, weren't they? Several of these were, if not all of them?
I believe all of them were included in the last legislative priorities adopted by this board. But to answer your question specifically, the answer is no. These were developed by the RMAs for the RMA's interest, and the point of me bringing it to you is to begin that process. So we've not spoken with any of our delegation, and I wouldn't do so unless I brought it to the board and asked for your review.
Well, again, these were created by not just us, right? Obviously, some organization of RMAs or something.
It's all the RMAs.
Right. So none of them have gone back and spoken to the respective delegation, the governor's office, or TxDOT on these things?
No, we haven't gone to TxDOT, but these have gone through some of the let me give you by way of example, the Transportation Reinvestment Zone legislation, that the RMAs and kind of additional backup for the new board members as well. We use a law firm by the name of Locklord, Bissell and Liddell. Brian Cassidy is our main point of contact there, and part of his role for us during the legislative session is to watch the legislature and make sure that anything that comes up that could affect the RMAs is brought to our attention so that we can reach out and deal with that. As part of that, he has spoken directly with Representative Pickett's office about the Transportation Reinvestment Zone legislation. So there has been some reaching out to certain individuals that are whether they're heading the state, the House side or the Senate side. So there has been some of that, but again, I have not taken this to our El Paso delegation.
Mr. Tejas, why don't we do a brief review of these items and just see if there's any questions, and then we'll move forward from there. Is that acceptable?
Absolutely. The first item deals with the elimination of the market valuation process and the implementation of a process for establishing primacy. We're really talking about two things there. Currently, and as you know, for an entity to pursue a toll project, you have to go through what's referred to as a market valuation process, and we are actually in that process for the Cesar Chavez project. It's a lengthy process that I think throughout the state has been seen as not a particularly effective way to deal with what the legislature was concerned with. Originally, this market valuation process was added to a bit of legislation that in the end, the goal of the legislature was to make sure that toll roads weren't thrown out on every single road out in the state. However, in practice, what it has done is created a new level of hurdles and new issues for valuable projects that actually could bring value to the communities. So I think there is a general consensus about eliminating the market valuation process, and in fact, the legislation that was proposed in the last session made it out of the, I believe, out of the House committee and was in line to go through the process. But of course, there were some issues in the last legislative session, so a number of bills died for lack of time. I believe this was one of them. So elimination of the market valuation process is one of our goals. Related to that, through the market valuation process, part of what you're doing also is establishing primacy, which essentially means that in our case, the RMA here would have primacy for the Cesar Chavez project. Primacy basically means that an entity has the right of first refusal to actually pursue a project. What we're asking for here, with the implementation of a process for establishing primacy, is actually backing off of Senator Nichols' pursuit, which also was developed in the last session. The idea was that you'd have a very clean and concise chart that identified the primacy process, which said at the outset with the toll project, a local entity like the region, like the Camino Real RMA, would have primacy first. If either we didn't comply with the timelines or chose not to pursue the project would then move on to TxDOT, and then you would have a sequence of events that would occur. So we're asking for the implementation of that process as well. So it's really a two-edged approach on that.
Just a quick question, if I may, Mr. Chairman. You're talking about the market valuation process is another hurdle, and it's proven to be more cumbersome than helpful. But there was an original intention in putting the market valuation in place. What was that original intention? And the other thing is, has experience shown that it's not helpful, or is it just something that, we just want to do things faster, so we'd rather not have that hurdle to go through?
Well, I think obviously this is always hard to judge the intent of the legislature, but
right.
my understanding is that the intent of the original legislation was to add a step so that the local communities had a say in regard to the placement of new toll projects. So the intent was clear, in my understanding. In practice, though, I think it's been universally agreed that it added steps that don't add value. In other words, part of the process, you have to identify the value of the project and whether or not the project will earn revenue, and if so, what do you do with that revenue? Well, there's actually legislation in place now that requires you to do that, and beyond that, from a business sense, no entity would actually develop a project without doing what's referred to as a level 2, for starters, a level 2 traffic and revenue study, which identifies how many cars would actually use this. So all of while the intent was clear, all of the procedures that were actually put into place are either in place already or were kind of superfluous.
It's not my impression that the market valuation process has actually served to make us more democratic or more accountable to the community, right? I mean, I don't think that anybody really participates in the market valuation process. If it was meant to be a point in the process for the community to have an input, it hasn't worked that way anyway, right?
That's correct. And in fact, I believe there's been one project that went through a full-blown market valuation process, and in the end, it collapsed. So no other entities are actually. There are carve-outs and exemptions for projects that are not what's referred to as toll feasible, and virtually every other project that has gone through, including ours, is seeking that exemption. So it's not doing what it intended to do.
It's my understanding it's redundant, it's expensive, and it's time-consuming, correct?
I agree with that, absolutely.
And there's enough checks and balances in place already.
I believe so,
Makes
yes.
it basically obsolete, right?
Yes, sir.
I think the checks and balances process is clear, and I think we're accountable at several points. But the point of the community having an input in the process, it's still something that worries me because we don't really, I mean, we never have any public comments, we never have any, and I know the Twitter campaign that we discussed last time and all that is for people to be more informed. But either we're facing a community that just doesn't really care, or we, we just simply should ignore that altogether. And
No, I think
Not sure.
I think the goal is to continue to push the information out there and make it available. Hence, we televise and stream the meetings. Everything's posted, and we,
Right.
part of our charter is to operate in a very transparent manner. So, and we welcome public comments. It just there hasn't been anything that really that earth-shaking that would require someone that I believe would kind of motivate someone to come in and have some comments.
it's a little bit like we can take the water to the horse, but we can't make it drink, right?
The issues aren't that sensitive. Exactly. When we get to the downtown, the Chihuahua for the second phase of Chavez,
Yes,
then I think you'll get all you want.
right.
You'll
Are
be
we,
standing in line.
we done with that first point? Dr. Payano, are you satisfied?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, can you move to second?
Absolutely. The second item deals with the extension of the authority to enter into comprehensive development agreements. As you know, comprehensive development agreements, one great example is the Americas Interchange project, the CDA that we just executed with the Americas Gateway Builders. There are different types of comprehensive development agreements, and the one that we just entered into is referred to as a design-build comprehensive development agreement. The authority for regional mobility authorities to actually enter into CDAs, design-build CDAs in particular, that expires by legislation in August of 2011. We're asking for that to be extended. I think that's a very valuable tool. Now, while there are other methods to get to where we would want to get, this has been such a valuable tool for regional mobility authorities, us included, that we're really interested in seeing that legislation, the timeline be extended so that we could continue to use this process. So I think that one's a pretty straightforward item.
Item 3.
The Regional Mobility Authority legislation, this is Chapter 370 of the Transportation Code. It really outlines and gives us the basis for which RMAs exist and what we can and can't do. This item actually was from the last session as well, and it got locked in that pipeline and died from the timing issue. This had made it out of the House Committee as well, and this was supported by the House Committee. Really what this amounts to a cleanup bill. It goes through 370 and makes certain revisions and certain clarifications. Among those, there's some language related to financing and issuing of bonds that bond councils throughout the state have been having issues with when they go and take the documents to the Attorney General. So that's kind of a cleanup item. Additionally, possible projects that can be pursued by RMAs are being clarified a little bit to make it abundantly clear, like, for example, that we can do the aesthetic project, that we can develop, manage, construct parking facilities, parking meters, and that sort of thing. So it's really kind of clarifying those ideas and also the collection abilities of regional mobility authorities. We're looking to be put on par with other entities in the state like HECTRA out of Houston and North Texas Turnpike Authority out of the Dallas area. So it's the addition of items that either had been left off, cleanup items, and that sort of thing. The next item then is a similar item. It's a cleanup to the Transportation Reinvestment Zone legislation. There's a great deal of history with that legislation. When it was originally put together, it was envisioned in one way and was taken apart during the legislative session and put back together. When it was put back together, it didn't quite fit right. Well, I shouldn't say that. It works. It works. But and I guess really my main point with this one is that we'd like to see the decoupling of the pass-through projects. And what that means is, and as you know, with the Americas project, because we are using Transportation Reinvestment Zone revenue, we have to have a pass-through component. And that has turned out to be a bit of a tough item for us. So with the Americas project, whereas we have 4 funding sources, we could have dropped it down to 3. There's no real need for the pass-through program to be involved in the Americas project, but for the fact that it's in the legislation. So we're asking for that to be removed. And the last item is kind of an interesting one, and I would note it doesn't necessarily apply to us now, but it may in the future. As you know, the local district of TxDOT is doing all of the environmental reviews and acquiring all of the environmental approvals for each of our projects. However, certain other RMAs throughout the state handle their own environmental processes, and in the future we may be in the same boat. However, what the RMAs in the state are finding is that because of a backlog of work, once you send your environmental documents up through the state and federal agencies, they're getting bogged down in those agencies because there's so much work coming through. So what has been proposed and what we were supportive of is the idea that if any particular RMA sends an item to the state or to the feds, we could fund a position to have that item be taken through the process quicker, so that they would be dedicated. So that funding would be dedicated to an individual. That individual would then be dedicated to the review of our environmental process, and it would expedite the process.
I don't know if I like that, because putting your mole in there so that they can get your project through.
We would not be selecting who does it. All we would be doing is providing the funding so that a person could be assigned. And it's also an option. We're not required to do this. This is just an option that if we have a project that is being held up due to environmental review, we have the ability to provide some funding to that agency so they can hire, they can select, they can approve whoever's going to review this and get it done. Because sometimes, as I understand, part of the issue is just not having the appropriate manpower to review the information. Is that correct, Mr. Tejas?
That's absolutely correct. Yes, sir.
So we wouldn't be selecting, we wouldn't be making any choices. All we would be doing is giving the appropriate agency the funds so that they have the ability to then go forth and source, select, and then actually review what we've presented.
That's right.
So there'd be mechanisms to ensure that this is not our guy approving our project in an agency that's supposed to be looking after the environment.
Absolutely. There would be no way that either the state or the federal agencies would allow for it.
Would we even know who this person is?
Well, we would like
We simply give them a check, look, help yourselves to get this done, and that's it?
There's a certain amount of back and forth, so I assume we would know who would be assigned. However, how they use their funding would be outside of our control. And again, as the chair pointed out, the idea would be that this is entirely voluntary. If we had a project that wasn't on a fast pace and we could wait it out, then we would do that as well. We could
But
certainly
if
do
we
that.
had something that had more of an urgency and we wanted to try to get the review completed in a more timely basis, this would be one more tool for us to utilize.
That's correct.
Let me just clarify, is that just for our RMA? We wouldn't coordinate with the others? And is that just to get ours through and then the funding would stop? And
That's
so this is a temporary position in order to ensure that our project gets through? Or is this something that the RMAs would coordinate to
no.
set up at the state and federal level? No.
The early discussions have always been that it would be a project-specific funding, as opposed to the RMAs coming together and funding a position that would always be there. That way, the way that it's being proposed would allow on a case-by-case rather than actually having a staff member being funded by the RMAs.
Ultimately, this is a legislative priority, not our decision to make. I suspect it's going to run into some opposition in Austin, but this is what we're lobbying for anyway, right?
Well, we're not doing anything yet. All
Right.
I'm doing here is presenting the 5 items that came out of
Right.
the meeting with the RMAs and saying, this is what it's looking like. Now, certainly between now and next month, when I come to you with the actual priorities, I'll be briefing you and letting you know how it's evolving. And next month, at next month's meeting, I'll actually ask for action to adopt. And at that point, if you're still uncomfortable, if we haven't resolved those issues for you, then you can certainly vote against it.
Okay, maybe we can see a little bit more of specificity in terms of what this would mean, and, the question that Susan had, I think is quite valuable.
Okay, absolutely. I'll keep an eye on that one in particular.
Who would write the check out to, this respective agency or to the controller?
The agency. This is agency-specific funding, is my understanding.
Can you guys take checks from us? You can? Some agencies, you just can't write it.
We're in the red, Ralph.
I know, but I'm just saying, I didn't know the mechanics. Some agencies don't have the mechanics to accept money.
Mr. Calvo, would you mind addressing the board? Are you familiar with this mechanism, and has TxDOT used this in the past?
Good morning, Eduardo Calvo with TechStat here in El Paso. I'm not very familiar with this proposal exactly, but we do, from local governments, there's some state direct costs that we charge, for example, the city of El Paso or some other local agencies to review documents and all that. So yes, we actually do require in some instances payment from the local entity, so we do receive checks once in a while.
You're going to look at this as well, Mr. Caldwell?
I'm assuming that TechStat is going to be looking at this one as well as all the other, legislative priorities, whatever comes out of this. But again, I think we all agree that the review process of environmental documents, especially, it takes way too long. Everybody, I think, agrees with that. So finding ways of expediting the process is for everybody's benefit.
Mr. Caldwell, question for you and Ray. What's the legislative environment in Austin these days? I mean, how are the RMAs doing in the political environment of 2011?
Don't ask me that.
Okay, fine.
You want to put me?
I'll do my research. I just wanted a quick.
The environment is going to be very difficult. You heard many of our El Paso elected officials, the state delegation, say that this session is going to be pretty intense, pretty tough. Other issues, in addition to transportation, are going to be, in the forefront. So, but I think it's fair to say that the environment is going to be tough.
As it always is.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think this is they got redistricting and a huge deficit. Whether they even get to this, I don't know if they're looking at a chance.
Scalvo, thank you.
Thank you.
8B, 2011 CRRMA Strategic Plan, 2010. Mr. Tejas?
Actually, if we could take 8B with 8C, which is the annual report. As you know, or actually, let me fill in some blanks here. And actually, for the backup for 8C, you'll actually see the statute that deals with strategic plans and annual reports. 370-261 is the individual section that requires regional mobility authorities to develop annual reports and strategic plans. Annual reports are dealt with in subpart B, while strategic plans are dealt with in subpart A. And I'll go through those very briefly. A strategic plan must be developed by a regional mobility authority every 2 years, and it must incorporate the next 5 years. The last one that we did was in 2009. Is that right? 2009, yes. From 2009 to 2014. So the next one is due in 2011 and will run through 2016. What I'm doing here for you all is letting you know that this is coming, and actually I'll be requesting that the strategic plan and the annual report be forwarded on to a committee so we can go through and identify the areas and the topics that this board would like covered by both of those documents. So 370-261A is the section that tells us that we have to have a strategic plan, and it also mentions that the commissioners' courts have to tell you what should be in that plan. Now, of course, as the municipally created RMA, we have to have the city council tell us what's in our strategic plan, and that's what you'll find under item 8B. And I apologize for the confusion. I think I actually added the wrong pages to the wrong section. But anyhow, the backup for item 8B shows you the resolution from the city council that tells us what's to be included in the strategic plan, which includes executive summary, identification of the board, vision and mission statements, goals for the plans, period, strategies to achieve the goals, and some other additional items. So as a starting point, you'll see what's required by law under 370-261 and by the resolution of the City Council. I've also included as backup in 8B the table of contents of the last strategic plan.
And our strategic plan has to be completed by December 31st of this year. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes, sir. So that
So
we
a
can.
little bit of time, but it is getting close, and we need to get to work.
Absolutely. Beyond that, 370-261B refers to the annual reports that are required. And those, you'll note, the statute actually tells you what's required. And each annual report requires So the authority's activities describing all transportation revenue bond issuances anticipated for the coming year, the financial condition of the authority, all project schedules, and the status of the authority's performance under the most recent strategic plan. Also included as backup in 8C are the table of contents for the 2008 and the 2009 annual reports. So what I'm doing here is I'm providing you background with regard to what's coming, why it's coming, and more importantly, what we have provided in the past. And I'll ask under items 8B and 8C that both the strategic plan and the annual report be referred to one of the committees for further development.
What committee do you recommend it?
I believe the planning committee would be the appropriate one.
And we will begin looking at the committees and assigning some of our new members going forward. So if you have a particular interest, if you'd let Mr. Tejas know, we can go from there.
Raymond, Mr. Chair, Raymond, how does this reporting or these reports you're going to have to create, aren't they pretty much the comprehensive mobility plan that was approved by council and us a while back? Wouldn't they be one and the same?
Essentially, yes, when you're talking about the projects. But you also have to include your finances, which are audits and that sort of thing.
But it shouldn't be that insurmountable a task because we're in sync with what council has approved as well as everyone else, right? The MPO, TxDOT, and a comprehensive mobility plan, so.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the region is in agreement, absolutely. We won't have any issues with regard to what the RMA wants to pursue versus what the community wants.
The planning committee needs to take a look at kind of the scope of our strategic plan, take a look at what the direction is of the RMA, make some recommendations, bring it to the board, and then we will incorporate that into the full strategic plan that we finish up at the end of the year.
I don't think, Mr. Chairman, the planning committee has met in a very long time, right?
That's correct.
I think I chair that committee. I'm not sure if it's changed. I don't think so, but it's been a long time. So I guess
we're due.
yes, we are.
Your day in this spot, right?
I think Tanny was there, so
Thank you for volunteering. We'll set that up next week, Dr. Payan. You let me know your schedule, and we'll get.
Weekends is a good time.
Item 8D, the fiscal year 2010 annual financial audit.
This item is just a reminder. We are also required by statute to complete an annual financial audit, and this will begin in the near term. As you know, for the past 2 years, we've used the accounting firm of Peña Briones, and we will use them per prior direction from the board. We will use them for this year as well. Sometime this next calendar year, we'll actually put out a bid for the selection of a new accounting firm. The direction of the board prior was that we used that firm for 3 years and then put it out on the street. So that's what we'll do.
So that was implemented based on the board's recommendation. Any other items to discuss under 8, Mr. Tejas?
No, sir. Subject to your questions.
Board have any questions? If not, is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? We are adjourned at approximately 9:40. Thank you.